It's 9 a.m., Monday, May 17th, 2021. All council members present, town manager, town attorney, deputy town clerk. And we'll start with the invocation, as always, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
We ask for your guiding hand to lead us through today's meeting. May we approach our task with wisdom, our members with respect, and our conduct create an environment of cooperation and kindness. We ask that your wisdom guide us as we seek to accomplish the goals on today's agenda. Thank you for the opportunities to accomplish our work this day. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Next item is the approval of the final agenda. Is there a motion to approve the final agenda?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I have a parliamentary inquiry for our town attorney. Gotten a lot of calls and texts about this. Are we required by contract to have a performance evaluation for the town manager before June 1st?
There is a general provision in the rules of procedure that the town council has adopted for itself on how to go through that process. It is wholly within your discretion. It is something that is uniquely within your province to decide how you want to go about through that evaluation process. Whether or not the contract has provision that says that you're supposed to be is aspirational, doesn't mean that if you don't do it that it's invalidates the contract. The charter says you all have the absolute discretion when it comes to the manager and to the attorney how you decide to review us and continue. The contractual relationship is only within your province, but as I said, when this issue came up several years back, the council adopted a review process for both of our positions in your rules of procedure, and I'll make sure that a copy of those get provided to each and every one of you prior to the end of today.
Mr. Adderholt, do you mind if I add to that?
I would yield, yes.
I understand that you may be asking to do it today because I believe it's our last meeting in May, but I believe the contract requires that we have to meet with him individually first, doesn't it?
I believe that the rules of procedure provide...
No, his contract.
I will find that out and answer that before the end of today.
I think it may not be possible to do today because I believe his contract requires that we meet with him individually before we do the evaluation on the agenda.
I think you're correct, Madam Vice Mayor, and I think it's spelled out in the contract, and there's should be some standards and other evaluation procedures that we've already put in place. I know we did the town attorney within the last year, and I'm just curious as to why we haven't done the town manager within that same yearly period. And I'm happy to do it. I agree with the Vice Mayor. I think today would be difficult given the contractual terms. The fact that we haven't done it seems odd to me.
I know that going back, my understanding, my recollection that the council did in fact review the manager's performance evaluation within the last year. To the extent that his contract, the rules of procedure provide for it to be done on an annual basis, and it's at the discretion of the council if you wish to do so at the next meeting or otherwise.
I'm sorry, John, are you saying that this council reviewed the town manager's contract in the last year?
My recollection is yes, that
I stand corrected. Am I missing something? I asked my new colleagues, have we done that? I don't have any recollection of that, but maybe we have.
My recollection. I think it was done just before, if memory serves.
Well, if you want to review the town manager, if in fact it's in the contract that you're to meet with him individually, my suggestion would be to go ahead and meet with the manager individually, and then we can bring it back at the first meeting in June. if so be.
I think that's fine. And could we be provided, Mr. Town Attorney, with what the evaluation standards are if they've already been concocted?
I think they're in the policy manual.
They're in the policies and procedures. And I make sure that you all receive a copy of that before the end of today.
I would also ask, Mr. Mayor, if we could move item B from the consent agenda and place it on the administrative agenda right after item B, because it's very germane to item C on the administrative agenda, and it's not out of any, I don't have any problems with it. I just thought it'd be a good opportunity just to explain further to the public what we're doing.
Fine? Which leaves,
I was going to second the motion to approve the final agenda as modified.
there first?
I assume that's what Jim was doing when he asked to move it.
I did make a formal motion, but I'm happy to do so.
Oh, you may second.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, the other item is A, which is the Florida Department of Environmental Protection Clean Vessel Act grant for the Matanzas Pass mooring field. Okay, any further discussion? Any objection?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Motion carries unanimously. Okay, the next item we will discuss B after, what did you say, after B of the administrative agenda?
Just a suggestion, since
Okay,
it's
that's
related
fine.
to C, yeah.
That's fine. Okay, the next item is a public hearing.
No, you jumped from approval of the
excuse
final
me.
agenda.
Oh,
You
excuse
jumped
me.
over public comment,
Oh, I sure did. Wow.
et
I
cetera.
was trying to set a record for today's meeting. Approval of final, okay, public comment, Mr. Clerk.
I have Janet Kernan.
Morning. Mayor Murphy and Council. Our island lost a source of news when the Sandpaper closed its doors in 2020. Since then, it's been a challenge to get in-depth news reporting, though the Observer and local agencies like Wink News do try. A few weeks ago, the town of Fort Myers Beach denied a permit for Beach Talk Radio to host their radio show from Town Square. My question is, why is our town allowing permits for some street performers and not others, and specifically why Beach Talk Radio has been denied? And why is the council allowing this inconsistency? Since moving to the beach full-time 3 years ago, I and my husband have watched town council meetings online as well as in person and seen the lack of consistency from some of our town hall employees. Time after time, in my opinion, decisions coming from this building have been inconsistent for our town. Ed Ryan of Beach Talk Radio will agree that his comments are not always the common consensus for our community. Even I have on more than one occasion have asked him to curtail his own personal opinions on matters, especially those that can be perceived as political. But that is freedom of speech. And we as citizens of the United States have an amendment that protects this right of speech. So I ask, why has Beach Talk Radio been denied their permit while an individual has been permitted to roam our beach, intimidate our residents and guests, supposedly in the name of religion? The community wants and needs consistency. I ask that you please answer my questions and work towards consistency in decision-making for our community in the future.
Thank you. Next.
Jesse Holman.
Morning, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of City Council. Hello, my name is Jesse Holman. I'm a newly resident since last year, and I'm a homeowner as well. My concern today is the consistent permitting process for zoning and building. I understand that there were new code changes that went into effect in 2020, and that one particular code change is a 10-foot setback. However, it is my understanding other residents in the community whom filed for building permits in the months of January and February were granted an extension on that 10-foot setback, reducing it back to the original 7.76 setback. I've worked with Mr. Green, who's done a wonderful job with me communicating on this issue, this issue, and I asked the council to consider allowing me that same extension to the 7'6" setback on my lot so I can continue with my project. Second issue I want to address is with planning and zoning is the codes and the follow-up. Where can I find codes reflecting on my plans, what I want to do? I spent over $14,000 on engineer plans to beautify my home, only to find out that what I want to do is not permitted because it now encroaches the setback. But however, those setbacks were legally permitted prior to my arrival. So I bought a property that was already encroaching on the setback, but yet when I want to lift that home 3 feet in the air, not disturbing the setback at all, I'm told no. Now I have to go through a variance, which is going to be more costly, where I'm going to have to hire an attorney to present my case. All I'm looking for is consistency with the zoning, and where to find these said rules to prevent me from lifting a home in its original footprint where I want it to go, only 3 feet in the air. It's for my convenience, it's for headroom, and it's for beautification of the neighborhood. I appreciate you guys taking any considerations into my verbiage this morning, and I look forward to hearing some type of resolution. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure the manager will get back to you on those items, and you as well, Mrs. Curran. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor.
That's it. Thank you, sir. Okay, next item is local achievements and recognitions. Come right up. Come right up. Sorry about that. Tommy Kohler.
Here's Tommy Kohler with Lighthouse Resort. Good morning.
Morning.
I'm here today to talk about a sidewalk that the town is proposing from Crescent Street on 3rd Street, going down and connecting with Old San Carlos. Our hotel has had access to parking from 3rd Street for decades. The proposed sidewalk would eliminate all of the parking along 3rd Street for us. So I believe Chelsea has given you all packets this morning that have some pictures of the street as it sits today, and then also an aerial view of the sidewalk that's proposed. We take the stance of we like the sidewalk idea. We think it's important for the local community to have access. We also don't want to eliminate our parking. So I thought would be a real win-win for everybody is if we have a sidewalk that would be ground level. I actually got the idea from a property on San Carlos Boulevard where it seems to work really well. I can get you the address at a later date. But I just think that that's a real win-win for us. It's a real win-win for you as well as the patrons that come and visit our island. So that's all that I've got, and if I can answer any questions, I'd for that.
Okay, Tommy, thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Yep, it'll be under consideration. Anyone else from the audience? All right, we'll move on to local achievements and recognitions. Right down with you, Councilman Beach.
Yeah, I'd like to recognize Casey Bishop for her extraordinary run on American Idol, even though she's not from the beach. She did a great job, really amazing poise for a 16-year-old and an amazing voice for anybody.
Good.
Nothing this morning, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Hey, I would echo your sentiments and about Casey Bishop, Councilman. We actually had some festivities planned in the eventuality that she moved on. She hasn't, but that in no way diminishes her achievements that she accomplished thus far. We also had a proclamation prepared And recognizing Casey, and I've edited it a little bit to reflect last night's happenings. So maybe we'll read it later on, and we'll give it to her anyhow, if everybody's in agreement with that. Could read it right now if you want. This is a proclamation. Whereas Casey Bishop, resident of Lee County, is a talented young lady who has grown up in Southwest Florida, gathering local attention as an exceptional singer. Whereas Ms. Bishop was chosen for and has competed for several weeks on the popular national show American Idol on the ABC network. Whereas Ms. Bishop has been quite successful in the competition on American Idol, voted as a top 5 finalist. Whereas American Idol promotes and recognizes the finalists on its show with pre-recorded public visits to their hometown, which is shared with the American Idol audience and fans. Whereas in that pre-recorded visit, Casey was to be performing in the town of Fort Myers Beach at Lee County's Crescent Beach Park. Whereas Town Council is immeasurably proud of Ms. Bishop's, is grateful for the attention that her talents and success on American Idol are bringing to the town and Lee County, and wants to ensure that she receives every well-wish possible for future success. Therefore be it resolved that Town Council hereby proclaims Tuesday, May 18th, 2021, as Casey Bishop Day in the town of Fort Myers Beach. With the council's approval, we could submit this proclamation anyhow and get it to Casey one way or another. Everybody all right with that? Okay. All right. It's Casey. I'm quite sure she'll do very well in the future, despite not moving on at this point. My other recognition is I'd like to recognize Tuna Skins here on the beach. They put on a nice fishing tournament this Saturday. It was their first annual, I think they called it Mayhem. Brought out 47 two-man 80 teams and children, and there was 120 or so fishing people there. It was very well done. It was a great community event. I was happy to be involved with it with my partner, and didn't do so well, but we had a good time. And it was a tough fishing day. It was a very low tide, strong northeast wind, and so forth. But anyhow, it was a great time, and there are community events like that make it fun living here on Fort Myers Beach. That's all I have at the moment. Vice Mayor.
Nothing.
Nothing. Dan?
And Councilor Veach
Covered
already
your
covered
items?
them.
Well, you're welcome to add to it if you like. You know.
I think you guys covered it all. Thank you
Okay.
to Tuna
All right.
Skin and to
Very
Casey.
good. Move on then. Advisory committees, items and reports. We have any advisory committee members here? Doesn't look like it.
Mr. Mayor, if I may just
Yes, sir.
opine in on that a little bit. Tomorrow they are going to be having the lighting consultants give some information out to the committee. If anyone chooses to come out and pay attention to that or have any questions, tomorrow will be the day. Or a day.
What committee? The
Public Safety Committee.
Oh, the public safety. Okay, very good. All right. Oh, that's right. And then Murph after following that, if I'm
Correct.
not mistaken. Good. Okay. We'll move on to the, we did the consent agenda, right? So we'll move on to, next item is public hearings. That's ordinance 21-04, text amendment to the Land Development Code, section 34-3273, residential uses and setbacks on nonconforming lots, 34-268, administrative setback variances. Mr. Green.
Good morning, Jason Green, Community Development. This is a cleanup of a section that was kind of left behind after the setbacks and height revisions. Unfortunately, in our code, as we've talked about before, there's sometimes 3 or 4 different places where things are hidden. So essentially, this is just a cleanup for that. The LPA reviewed it and recommended approval. They've also added, there's a change of removing a section from this main section that we're editing related to setbacks, moving it into administrative variances because it's where it belongs. It was in the wrong section. So that changes that you see. Really, what it does essentially is it eliminates another version of the 5-foot setback for non-conforming lots that was.
Questions, Mr. Green?
I just noticed there's one place where it was, when it's talking about non-conforming lots, 34-32732, there was a limitation of 4,000 square feet, and another limitation saying 40 by 75 lot size, which is about 3,000 square feet. So, but the 4,000 was removed. Is that somewhere else, or is that just removed because it wasn't?
That was originally removed because we went back to basically if you have a platted lot, if it was part of the minimum use determination. That was a change that was done a while back, that basically you have platted lots in the community that are sometimes at 3,800 square feet, and they've been around for 70 or 80 years. They're, and so your section, that section now recognizes if it was a platted lot and on a road and had utilities, then you build on it. So the 4,000 square feet.
Okay.
You had questions for Mr. Green? You, sir? We'll open it up to the public. Anyone from the public wish to speak to this item? Seeing none, we'll close it. We'll bring it back to the council. Any further questions? If not, we'll schedule this for the second public hearing and second reading and final adoption for June 7th, 2021 at 9 a.m. Correct?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, because this is an ordinance, read the full title and then have the clerk call the roll.
Very good.
And this needs swearing in?
Sorry? It's not a quasi-judicial. Ordinance 21-04, an ordinance of the Town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, approving an amendment to the Town of Fort Myers Beach Land Development Code, Section 34-268, Administrative Setback Variances, and Section 34-3273, General Requirements for Residential Uses on Non-Conforming Lots, providing for scrivener's errors and effective date.
Now we'll call the roll. Okay.
I don't think we had a second on the motion.
I'm sorry.
I think the mayor made the motion. Right?
Yes. All right.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Call the roll. Councilman Allers.
Aye.
Aye.
Vice Mayor. Mayor, aye.
Aye. Aye.
Yeah, motion carries unanimously. That item will be moved to second hearing and final for adoption on June 7th, 2021 at 9 a.m.
Mr. Mayor, I think I threw you by moving the consent agenda B over to the administrative agenda. I think we missed consent agenda item A. So we went right from advisory committee reports to the public hearing, so.
Well, I read it. I didn't think anyone wanted to discuss it. That's why we have the consent agenda, right? So you only pulled the one item from the consent agenda?
Yes. We're
Pulled
good?
B.
Okay,
Yeah, so we're good.
Okay,
Yeah.
very good. All right, thank you.
Okay. Okay, next item is B. It's vacation of a portion of School Street right-of-way, BAC 2021-0035. This is to authorize the vacation of a portion of town right-of-way on School Street to the Lee County School Board. Someone from the staff, Jason?
I can speak to this one, Mayor. This is just part of the process of completing the vacating of the right-of-way that we're going to be transferring to the school board in exchange for them conveying to us the property that we need for the improvements to Bay Oaks. As we previously discussed, during the course of after the original vacation, we were advised by the school board that they wanted us to move some of the improvements away from the school, and as a result, that left a piece of the right-of-way unaccounted for, and so this resolution, if approved, takes care of that triangular piece of property that will be subject to the transfer of property from the town to the school board, and as I said, in exchange, they're giving us a portion of their property to allow us to make the improvements on Bay Oaks.
Thank you. Anything you wanted to add to that, Mr. Green, or is that's pretty well covered it? Okay, is there a motion to approve this vacation of a portion of town right-of-way on
So
School
moved.
Street? Been moved, is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Objection? The motion carries unanimously. Okay, we'll move on to the administrative agenda. First item is the mooring field upland services. A little discussion of this.
We have a, Mr. Mayor, we have a little short slide show for this, I think. I don't know if it's on the screen or just handed out to you all.
Yes.
I just mentioned to the council, Chelsea, that the slides prepared by Coastal Engineering can be distributed to the council.
Yes, sir.
Can we get this on there so the public can see it as well?
Well, Jason is working on technology to get the various sites on the screen. As previously discussed with town council, site, of course, has its positives and negatives in terms of functionality to meet this purpose. And we're trying to see if there's desire to limit the sites or focus on a particular site because the council thinks it's the best site, or at least prioritize the sites for purposes of us moving forward. So there's been 7 sites discussed. Be able to show those to the public in a minute.
While they're getting that together, could I ask a question of Chelsea? When I looked at these, I didn't remember that we had ever discussed site number 1 before. Is that a new one? It's, okay.
Ma'am. While perusing the options
Okay.
that were out there.
Okay, I just, when it was earlier kind of implied that we had discussed these, I thought, I didn't remember we had discussed that one before, so.
I think I've just mentioned in passing that we're looking at a site off island.
And am I seeing that correctly? It's right next to the, like, parking lot? Is that for Pink Shell?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
That's site number 1.
yes.
Yes,
You see that, that's next to Pink Shell
sir. Okay.
on the base side. Okay.
And what's on the other side of it? It looks like it also is parking, or is that just a vacant lot?
I believe that is out to the north. Outside, maybe.
There isn't a residential house right next to it on either side.
If you go to the next. It's on the east.
Heard any good jokes lately?
Start with the overview of all the sites.
Chelsea O'Reilly, Public Works Director for the town of Fort Myers Beach. So this is the overview sheet. As you can see, this is our existing mooring fields. This is the proposed, which approval from DEP is imminent. I should have that hopefully by the end of the week. I just got word last Friday. So the first site for potential upland. Oh, yeah, so on here it's kind of hard to see, but it starts at the north and heads south. So here's site number 1. Site number 2 is Harbor House. Site number 3 is Lee County's parcel on San Carlos Island. Site number 4 is Virginia Avenue, which is right here. Site number 5 is directly right behind Town Hall. Site number 6 is the Tops parcel, or what is now the Fire District's parcel. Site 7 is Bay Oaks. And of course, we have our existing amenities at Matanzas Cerro Bay Hotel. Site number 1, the north end of the island. There are pros and cons to each parcel. Essentially, like the town manager said, is we're looking to better define and narrow down this list. That way we can spend some resources looking into those particular sites, or all of them if they're still on your list. So run through each. Again, there's pros and cons of each. Parking is always a limit anywhere on this island, but this site does have boat access with an existing pier, but that would require modifications.
See, what's the listing price for this property right now?
2.2 million. So that was site number 1. Is there any other questions for that one? Okay, site number 2 is the Harbor House, which you've seen in the past. It's a condo unit currently owned by Estero Bay Hotel Company. So again, pros and cons to every site. 825 square feet and directly on the water. Boat access is the dock. Parking is topic.
Well, see, I'm sorry, I should have asked this for site number 1. Can you go back to site number 1?
Yes, sir.
It says there's an existing structure that would require renovations.
Yes.
Could you just talk a little bit about what's there, what kind of structure it is, and what kind of renovations would be involved?
It's a 1970s home. I think it's got 5 units on it, but that would require some renovation as well as the existing pier that's out there. It would need some updates.
You say it's a 1970s home with 5 units. You mean 5 bedrooms, or do you mean?
LoopNet said 5 units. We haven't confirmed exactly how many are out there yet.
You use the term units. What do you mean by that? Is that separate, say, 5 different apartments, or?
I haven't gone that deep
Okay,
into.
I'm just curious. All right, thank you.
That's a fair assumption.
Yes. Right, so there's the Harbor House. Other questions for the Harbor House unit? Moving on to site number 3. This is San Carlos Maritime Park. Its existing use is the boat ramp that is for all of the local agencies, FWC, the town. There are a lot of the major construction for dredging. They load that equipment into the water. This is owned by Lee County. It would require an interlocal agreement. There is an existing ramp there that we would not want to impede, but the vehicle parking, again, all topics.
Where's the entrance off the road?
Main Street. It's like you're going into Trico.
Okay.
Through with that.
So, just so we're in.
We would be paying them rent forever.
Look at a financial arrangement. Point is that, we were concerned that if the bar use took over 100% of the property, they may lose some amenities that they need in perpetuity, so we'd be hesitant about that. So we looked at it and concluded that it could stay towards the north half of the property in terms of our building, and that would leave the southern half as it's shown on this map. It's not really south, but the bottom half, I guess, is a better way to describe it, will be available for them to continue its present uses or develop a future use by Lee County.
Just for myself, that option makes the most sense to me out of everything that's been presented thus far. Right smack in the middle of where all these people are already, has similar uses surrounding it. Sure, we could work something out with Lee County, but that's just my own opinion for right now. Sorry.
Any other questions or comments for site number 3?
No, my concerns with it is, I understand that it's physically set up well, but it's kind of far away from how you'd have to walk to get to things like restaurants and whatnot, and it also, it's in Lee County, so just worry that we're giving a lot of the benefits of this Fort Myers Beach asset now to Lee County, and it's not like particularly profitable for us, so that's my biggest concern with Off Island site.
They have their dinghies. I don't see that there's much there to attract them to walk around at the moment, as far as the shops and the restaurants and so forth. But, again, that's my opinion. Looking into.
On to site number 4. This is Virginia Avenue. It is right-of-way. I know we're working with the town attorney to look at the underlying uses of that right-of-way and seeing if that's a possibility, but as of right now,
Yeah, I've looked at the plat that was forwarded to me by staff. And unfortunately, unlike the other property where we had the discussion about the bathrooms, the plat for this subdivision has zero language regarding dedication of right-of-way or what it's intended for use, et cetera. So my educated guess is that to the extent that the town has acquired ownership, it's as a result of the maintenance, not necessarily as a plat dedication. Under state law, there's a method by which governments acquire title to properties, street rights of way that they maintain, and that we inherited from Lee County. But I would be very hesitant to try and use that for any other purpose than otherwise specified. Said it's not even on the face of the plat. It doesn't even say that it's for right-of-way purposes. Certainly not for any other valid public purpose, which is what the there's a discussion about the bathrooms. That's very specifically said that it was granted to the government for any public purpose, valid public purpose. No such language exists on the face of this plat. So I'm very reluctant to try and use it for anything other than what it has been historically been used for.
That's a buildable lot?
I would even question that. You're talking about an extremely narrow and tall building to accommodate the uses that staff would need. I mean, I'm guessing that it's probably going to be a 2-story building. Okay, guess. Which itself then means the cost is an elevator. You have to,
I wasn't thinking about us building it. I was thinking about us selling it to somebody else to build it, and we use the proceeds to finance the
single-family
project.
home, a whole completely different ballgame.
Okay.
I don't think you're allowed to sell a right-of-way or
Yeah, I again, same analysis that I just gave you is I'd be very reluctant to you to do anything different than on that right-of-way than for purposes or road purposes, since it does seem to be limited to that use at this point in time, based upon my review of the title information.
What are those purposes? Street purposes, road purposes? What are they?
Road, right-of-way, parking, access would generally be what that is. Normally, the law in Florida says that on the face of a plat, if there's a dedication, it's for whatever purposes are specified in that dedication. As I said, in this particular instance, there's no such language whatsoever. And my legal opinion is that ownership in the name of the town has been acquired pursuant to state law, which says that after it's 3-4 years of regular maintenance of a right-of-way, that underlying right-of-way transfers to the government road. Here, from what I can see, that the right-of-way that's at issue hasn't even been opened. But you could put parking there, or put it up if that's where the council's direction.
Members will love that.
Using it for a upland service facility would be
Stretch.
stretch.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Elsie?
All right, moving on. Site number 5, there are 4 parcels behind Town Hall, all of which are owned by the owner. On LIPA review, there is some waterfront. Town Hall, they are privately owned. Of course, have to fire and then construct and potentially dredge. That's another option that we've identified.
Would all 4 of those be required because of the one on the, I guess, furthest down on the page? The only one that would have the water access?
We would have to look into it as it pertaining to dock and what that would require in space-wise and how many we could accommodate. That's something we could look further in.
That's a fair assumption.
Do we have a rough estimate of what these properties will cost to acquire?
I can tell you the 3 long pieces, they were posted right before COVID, and they were asking $400,000.
About the trapezoidal one?
I am not privy to that as it hasn't been posted online, at least in the last 2 years, but that's something we could look.
How many dinghies do you need to accommodate?
Well, if we had 89 mooring balls, they're 25% of that coming in, checking in. They wouldn't be staying there in the check-in process.
So is that about what you have now under the bridge?
Well, under the bridge, it's open to the public. So anybody with a dinghy up there, including those that are in our field. But because that was used with grant funding.
Isn't this, the canal we've already discussed is subject to litigation?
That's a different canal.
That's a
one
different
over.
That's the
canal.
next one.
Yeah, that's the next one. Other questions regarding this site?
Makes a lot of sense to me since find on the other one. This one makes some sense. I know it's an expense to the town, but there's room for expansion there for other things that the town could potentially need down the road to protect some of its other assets, like the machinery we rent and things like that. This one makes a lot of sense. This is one I would like to keep consideration open for.
I think in my mind, really, this is all about getting the canal access close to Town Hall, that where a facility would be constructed would not necessarily have to be on one of these lots. It could be adjacent to Town Hall, right on the other side. And then that would also make, the management for personnel.
I'm looking at also from the pump out boat and everything is much closer to Town Hall. Here, I mean, just the access makes sense.
Site number 6, the parcel, or now the fire district's parcel. Of course, we wouldn't looking to utilize all of it, but back edge. Our footprint as small as possible. Parking, kayak launch. We do have an existing kayak launch. This is the one that the vice mayor alluded to now.
Will we be looking to just rent a part of this or section it off to own a part of it, or what would be the preferred method of trying to acquire part of this?
It would be up to what the fire department would be willing to do. So for example, they may say, well, it built some space in our building, or create an out parcel for you, or those, that would all be subject to negotiation. But the underlying issue there is, the claim of private ownership of the canal bottom means that if that's valid, you can't see pilings into the bay bottom without an additional arrangement with that individual or individuals.
Could we manage the dinghy dock that's already there, if that's the case? Did we have to work through litigation with them?
Property,
That's on ours,
and
okay.
it's like a floating dock.
Okay.
Gulf Beach Road, right of way.
This is the old Casey's Alley entrance.
That dinghy dock there is pretty small, I think, isn't it? How many dinghies can you not hold?
It's actually a kayak launch, and I think it's
Depends on how long your rope is.
exactly. Site number 6.
Okay.
We have site 7, the Bay Oaks property. It's owned by the town. It's in the middle of redesign. Again, this would abut the same canal that we just talked about. There would be with permitting, mangroves, things like that. Towards the back end, this is owned by Lee County, but this is abutting right of way. So similar issues to the previous parcel. But if you look proximity to the mooring field,
Questions? Questions for Chelsea?
It looks like concentration of the mooring balls is more towards the, we're going to call this the east, right?
the hot spot everybody wants to be because it's the shortest distance to the dinghy dock to get downtown.
Right. So the ones that are in that cluster that's to the east, is that like one of the last ones to
Yes.
look out?
Exactly. The Westfield is a hot one, and we expect if the expanders could accommodate much larger vessels towards the proximity to the dock in downtown. Well,
Just a side note, I've heard from people that having that new mooring field opens us up to larger sailboats that can't get under the bridge. I think that there's some demand.
yes, sir.
Well, I think, I think similar to what we talked about with building off of Town Hall, that, Bay Oaks is currently in the planning process. I understand it's a little further away from the center of town. But similar to Town Hall, if you built something in Bay Oaks, and it means you already have personnel that are there, so you wouldn't need to have another body you would place at a remote location.
Other questions for Chelsea? I have a question for Chelsea and Roger. What, are we working under any sort of time constraints now? I mean, are there any?
Yes, we have a contract that's has no renewals in it. My understanding from talking to the contract service provider is that they don't necessarily want to continue to provide the service. They would be willing to let us rent out their space and use their current amenities until we found an alternative should we exceed the deadline. I also spoke to that same individual because they had offered us sell or lease to own or some arrangement. I believe he received an email about that from that individual. Parcel property they have within the Harbor House condominium. So I think that was provided to you about 2 weeks ago. I had a subsequent conversation with Doug, and in that conversation, we discussed the concern that I've heard from many of you about the condo form of ownership, and suggested to Doug that if he could figure out a way to insulate the town from that, it might alleviate some of the council's concern. And I don't know if and I suggested if he could figure out a way to do that he should reach out to you all. I don't know if he did or did not do that.
Or an amendment to the condo docs?
Well, if it's a lease to own for a long period of time, he's the owner, he's the one dealing with the condominium board, not us. And if, under that arrangement, if an issue with the condo board arose, we could arrange a sort of a good out for us, our exit strategy, if that happened. He felt, at least in my conversation with him, that it wouldn't be an issue for the foreseeable future with the existing board. But I said that, again, because of the concerns that several council members have raised, not that he would need to find a way to insulate us from that. So if it were a problem, it would be his problem, not our problem.
All right. So, few of the council members have expressed interest in various properties that needed more information brought forth. So,
I heard 3.
I was just
There's a
waiting for,
4th?
I was waiting for everybody to get done. I'm still interested in knowing more about site number 1. One of the reasons that we're looking at doing this is the issue of control. That's why I have hesitancy about using Lee County property. The whole reason we want to do this is so that we control our situation. So using a condo, we don't have control. Using Lee County property, we don't have control. And I like Dan's points about Chapel Street, but you've got at least 15 residential houses there between where we would be having people go in and out and up and down that canal. So I think I think that's a great place to use, but I think we're going to get residential pushback from using that. So that brings me back to site number 1 as being a possibility that has the least drawbacks that all of these others do. So I'd like to pursue 5 and 1 personally.
Chelsea, do we know how many square feet do we need for the upland facility, bathrooms, laundry, et cetera, et cetera?
If you give me a minute, I could do a rough calculation.
Like Roger's looking at, I'm still not completely against option or site number 2, based on what the town manager has said he had talked with Doug about. It can't hurt to keep negotiations open or discussions to see if anything could come of that. Where everything kind of is in the middle of everything. I'd like to keep that option open if my fellow council members feel that there's any room for movement on that, on the condominium end of it.
Having lived in a condo, I would vehemently object if part of the condo was sold off to a business. I didn't buy into the condominium to live in a building that became part of a business. I think you'd have to get 100% consent from your condo owners before they could sell it off. I just find that to be highly unlikely.
Is that a discussion that could be had, I guess?
Well, I'm not for having discussions about things that are highly unlikely, I guess, is the way I look at it. I mean, I think it's highly unlikely that that could be accomplished.
We'll agree to disagree on that. I think having discussions about something you may perceive as highly unlikely doesn't necessarily mean that everybody else feels that way.
Do you think 100% of the people who own condos would consent to having a business, or their building sold off and having a business there? When that wasn't what they purchased when they
I can't answer that, but I can answer it 100% if we don't ask.
They did purchase it. No.
We knew there were commercial uses, but not commercial uses that were outside of their control. Commercial uses currently are under the condo board control. If they sold off a part of the building, it would no longer be under the condo board control.
I would actually, I think there is potential for Site 1, although it's like the ones at Bay Oaks or the fire department or town hall. It's quite a ways away from the center of the mooring field, but I'm assuming that most of the traffic comes in from the west. It would be at the entrance, wouldn't be traversing down the entire mooring field and then coming back to wherever their mooring ball is. I'm assuming that this is like a pretty large building, and the price tag is certainly a downside to it because it eats up a lot of budget. But if we do go forward with some kind of workforce housing, this might be a place where there would be space to put some workforce housing in addition to the upland facilities.
Good point, Bill.
Council Veach, based on the, we would fit something on the county's property on San Carlos Island that is approximately 65 feet by 35 feet, so that's 2,275 square feet.
What's the square footage of the Harbor House site that we were developing?
It's 825 square feet. Condo owned, I think another 500.
We're like 1,200 square feet.
But what's here is just the single.
That's constrained by the size of those two existing units. So we put as much in there as we could fit in there versus something that we're starting with a blank piece of paper. That's the difference between the two. Clearly, we could do something smaller.
Okay, so between 1,000 and 2,000 square feet.
Yes.
Cars.
If you have more use for, again, if you have competing use, then that maybe makes you be a little bit more conservative in your.
I think one other thing that nobody's talking about when you talk about space, it's not just the space of the office and the laundry. We have mooring balls lying out in our parking lot at times while they're moving them in and out. We have a boat parked in our parking lot that services the mooring field. There's a lot of storage and other things that could be used if we had more space.
All right, so for example, the county building on that site, if that was a site the council was interested in, would be elevated, and we could use the space under the building, parking infrastructure.
I'm thinking about site number 1. Space.
It does.
Well, I think we need some more information on all these. I mean, we have a rough idea of site number 1. 2.2 was the ask on that, so you got to figure it's pretty close with this market that we're in. Renovations are going to be required for the building. The renovations is going to be required for the dock, the amount of time that we need to, the permits to renovate the dock. So there's some costs that have to be looked at, and versus the lease option with the county over on San Carlos Island. Construction, hard costs over there to build a building, whatever sort of arrangement's going to be made with Lee County, there need to be some initial talks with those guys and kind of feel them out and see where,
Right, well, so purpose of today's discussion was to see if any sites could be eliminated, because clearly, for each site we investigate, it's going to cost time and money for us to investigate that site. So if there are any that you're disinterested in that we could take off the table, clearly based on the town attorney's statement, I would think Virginia would come off. I don't know if there are any others, and then we could take direction about the remainder as to what you would like us to do.
Does the council agree that Virginia should be taken out of the discussion?
Yes.
I think 4, 6, and 7 would be 3 that I would.
Virginia, you may sleep well tonight knowing that we're not going to intrude your neighborhood. Okay, that Virginia's out. About, let's
I thought you liked 5.
I said 4, 6, and 7.
Eliminate.
Take out.
I just feel that getting into,
Yeah, I agree.
Fight
Take 6
legal-
out. We don't want to be involved in that litigation.
I think it's more than just that now you're looking at acquiring and building, which is the most expensive option. And so I would agree with 6.
Well, we'll be doing that too, but, you know,
I'm not opposed to acquiring and building as long as it's something, and that was what I was gonna bring up in a few minutes was whatever we tell the staff to move forward with, I think it's important that they give us an idea of what, if we acquire property, whether it's the one on the north end or the one behind the town hall, what else it can be used for. I think that we're gonna get, the vice mayor had mentioned that we're gonna get some pushback from neighbors if we're in a residential area. Well, I can certainly guarantee you that we're gonna get some pushback spending 2.2 million plus on something that is going to the mooring field. Just based on conversations I've had with the public so far, there's gonna be some pushback. So I think having some clear direction of what other things it could be used for makes a lot of sense to at least justify the talking of it.
I agree, more than just the mooring field.
okay. So, are we in agreement that Site 6, the Tops property, is out of consideration?
Yes.
I don't hear.
No, I just understand the litigation issues there. I do think there is potential, again, this is a stretch, an opportunity there. I agree, by the way, taking Virginia off. I think if the town, I would yield to our town attorney on this, if the town was to partner with those residents on that canal and the fire department and join in litigation to clarify who owns that canal, and I think there's a decent chance we could be successful. How quickly we could do it is a whole other issue. We could win some really good will with those folks on that canal who've really been, to use the word, terrorized by this legal threat. If we could clean that up and clarify it for those homeowners, we win goodwill. And again, we have to acquire. Maybe there's a leasing opportunity with the fire district that we could come together. It seems like, and again, John, I would yield to you if you think would be any hope of a litigation, you probably don't want to opine on that, but if there's a chance we could help clarify that for those homeowners, we could solve a number of problems and plus build some goodwill without having to acquire 4 plots of land and maybe lease it from the fire district. I'm just thinking out loud. I'm not,
I would suggest that the issue of ownership, putting that aside, isn't necessarily, my opinion, isn't the priority, which is something that's compatible with the fire districts and its proposed use of the property. My preliminary conversations with the fire district regarding the Bay Bottom is their desire to put fire apparatus on the water. And I don't know if there's enough room there for town and the fire district to coexist.
that's a fair question. That's why, until we answer these questions, it's hard to take it off.
Yeah,
But you make a good
maybe
point.
that's the instead of putting the issue of the litigation first, it's whether that's even something that is doable.
If the town ever acquires a boat or whatever for fire purposes, I mean, you just never know what that's a fair question. I just don't know the answer. That's why I hate to take it off.
Talk to the fire department that I've had, right now they have no plans for that. And they don't say they're never gonna have plans for that, but to put a fireboat down a long canal like that you have to, they don't like to go slow when there's an emergency. So there's a lot of inconvenience with it. But I think one of the other ways to achieve some goodwill with people on these canals is to know that will be, canal will be dredged and maintained a little more. Because, I know it's a bit of a random thing. You go through the island, some canals don't work very well at low tide. Some are deep. I'm not sure what the status of these 2 canals are. But one of the cruxes is can you build something there that will hold enough dinghies to service what you need to service? I think is the real crux.
That's a good point. I look at this, and I appreciate the litigation risk on the canal, but if you look at the one behind the town, I'd acquire 4 plots of land plus build a building. If there's an opportunity to lease it from the fire district, then build our building, that seems like it could be a significant cost savings. Again, I'm not saying this is the answer. Might be worth keeping on the list for a little while until we see what the fire district's plans are. I don't feel that strongly about it. If the council wants to take it off, that's fine.
Well, the fire district is just starting to from what I understand, beginning to put together their team to, analyze the property and begin their process of space planning and all of that for the property. So they're just getting close to completing their professional team who will be assisting the fire chief and his staff to make those determinations. So they're going to make the determination about, as part of that, once they have that team assembled with regard to, are we going to include, a dock for a fireboat and a fireboat? And they're going to have to resolve the private property claim as part of that analysis. And of course, we could partner and support their effort versus taking the lead when they get to that point in time, if that's the council's preference. Likewise, they're going to be, at some point, they're going to be asking for some zoning consideration from the town. So there are points of discussion with them at that point in time. The only thing we don't know is their calendar, their schedule, their clock. They would like to do it sooner than later, but planning and designing and bidding and building that building is not something that's going to happen.
What we could do is keep it on in sort of a wait and see mode.
That'd be
and just
fine.
leave it hanging around.
That'd be
and,
fine.
I have a feeling that if, like site number one, this particular real estate market, may not last very long, if it indeed isn't actively being marketed now. I don't know why it is still for sale, to be honest with you, but,
A lot.
huh?
I think they're asking a lot of money.
Is it? Yeah, well, that's conceivable, but, anyhow, we'll have to keep an eye on it to
I think, and I'll tell you, Jim, why I'm not really that in favor of 6 is because at a 5, 6, and 7, they all have much of the same constraints. They're all dealing with the restriction on dinghy docks. They're all dealing with the canal, which has residences on it. But with 5 and 7, we already have facilities that are built or being built. So we could leverage on that.
I'm okay with 5 and 7 as well. I'm open-minded on those as well. I just thought that since we have to buy a number of plots of land for 5, that could be cost prohibitive. But I'm open to exploring 5. I just see an opportunity with this. The fire district's potentially going to sell the front end of their property for development in order to recoup some of the cost of purchasing the land. We may be able to work with them to develop a master plan where it might make sense for them as well to lease it to the town, or just, like the mayor said, doesn't have to be front and center, but I just hate to take it off the list in case there's an opportunity down the road with the fire district to work together and partner on something. Again, I'm not making a big deal to me in
I
terms
guess
of.
my frustration is that they've brought us 7 possibilities. Time is somewhat of the essence here. We have taken off 1. So I just feel like we're not making any progress.
It's fine to take 6 off. That's fine if that helps narrow things down.
And I would also honestly propose taking 2 off Harbor House, because I think we've been down that road a long time, and I think that it's just too restrictive being part of an HOA. It's just too uncertain, and we don't have the control that we would under.
I would remove it as well.
It's 2 people. Is the third willing to remove Arbor House? We'll leave it on there for I think you're getting a sense of the priorities, though. I think you are. I hope you are.
Well, I'm knowing which ones are falling off. I wish it was a smaller list, but that being said, at some point, and I think I forgot who raised it, but I think at some point we have to, I think maybe it was Councilor Allers, we're gonna have to talk about a budget for this, because right now, we don't have a specific budget for this project. So, and these numbers, potentially, if we're buying private property and renovating or building on it or whatever, this is going to be an expensive proposition. So,
Since
fine.
you mentioned that, Roger, just to help us along, obviously, the new Bayfront park that's been approved by the council did not include the building, and we originally had budgeted money for that building. Does that money still exist in some sense that could be applied to this project?
So what happened with the loan, just in general, is that when the bank told us that the overhang, Times Square, not be paid for by the loan because of the tax exempt status of the loan, because it benefited private property too directly. We decided to fund that outside the loan, like this council made that decision. That created some capacity within the loan for this project. But based on some of the properties that the council is considering today, would not be adequate to deal with some of the projects that, location sites you're considering. It was enough money to put a raised building on a piece of property we already owned, and the council had considered that and decided that wasn't a good location. So, to put a picture in your mind, you have enough money for that building, which you all saw and said you didn't want to go forward at that location. That's what we currently got, a free piece of land. So now we either have to.
Money for the building, but not for the acquisition of the property.
Right, so,
Yep.
so
Okay.
that's kind of where we're at.
That helps.
Well, depending on how the negotiations go with the county over on on that site for leasing, it could be cost beneficial over there. I mean, as
I
far
think
as,
that's right.
as far as putting.
Well, there's a couple things with that. If we could reach an agreement with the county, there's a couple things. One is, obviously, we would strive for a long-term agreement.
Right.
In the case that county says, well, we'll give you a long-term agreement, but we're with, I don't know, 5 years' notice, we could ask you to move because we have some future plan. I don't know what that might be, but let's just say they had said that. Going down up front, that would put us in a position that we could build the building so it could be moved to another location if we had to, on the road, 20 years, 30 years down the road, who knows? So, yeah, that might be, other than putting it on a piece of land that the town already owns, that might be the second most cost-effective option, depending upon what the county would ask for.
Or they might be interested in some sort of joint venture to develop the property.
Could build more on it and give them some space that they may use as an offset against the rent, or whatever. Those are all conversations that would need to be had.
I just think that's the route to explore myself, but anyhow.
I mean,
Okay.
yeah, my concerns about I'm not particularly a fan of investing off island, outside the city limits. And I don't really like building on leased land. I mean, it's my fundamental objections.
All the time.
Yeah, I know.
That water that's lapping up into that boat ramp is our water. So that's within, I'm pretty sure that's within our town limits right there. That's close, but regardless, semantics. Okay, well, you have clear direction, so good luck.
Crystal. Really? Yeah, I just need a crystal ball.
All right. Okay, well, I think we beat that up enough.
But just a sidebar to this, have you got any clarification about this grant money coming in from the federal government?
I sent to the council the last clarification, if you want to call it that. I don't know that I would really call it that, but the last guidance we received. I haven't gotten any new guidance since that was about a week ago.
And I don't think this would qualify under the current guidelines.
From what I read, it
No.
wouldn't have any impact on it at all.
Okay. Done? I don't want to cut you off.
No, we're good.
Criticized for that. Okay, we'll go on to item B on the administrative agenda, which will be followed by item B of the consent agenda. B is North Estero Phase 2 Side Streets STA This is to authorize the town manager to execute supplemental task authorization for Tetra Tech not to exceed $241,780 for North Estero Phase 2 side streets, additional services for water, stormwater improvements, and CEI under contract number 14-15-PW. Is there a motion to approve this supplemental task authorization?
Moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
I have a quick question, Mr. Mayor. Page 123, the numbers don't seem to add up. Is that a typing error, or is that, it seems like it's off by $304,701.
It'll be the lesser of the two numbers when we finalize it.
Well, if you add those numbers up, it doesn't add up to $546,501.
It'll be at the lesser of the two numbers.
What page was that?
123.
23.
Trying to get there. On 23?
123, yeah.
Could it be there's an Exhibit A that's not part of this, that's a total from another page?
It could be, it just looks
Thinking,
weird.
yeah.
Yeah, but the authorization amount seems to be what the, closer to what the actual total is, not the.
Yeah, I don't know what this bottom total is, but the amount that we're asking to be authorized is the 241,780.
Okay, any further discussion? Any objection? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, now we're going to go back to item B on the consent agenda, and this is the approval of STA number 10 to contract number RFQ-20-06-AD for beach monitoring and survey work. This is to approve STA for number 10 to contract RFQ-20-06-AD, monitoring and surveying the beach profile along the entire length of Fort Myers Beach, and survey, it's supposed to be borrow, area offshore, north of Staro Island, and allocating $15,000 from Town Hall Modeling Project 088 for project funding. Is there a motion to approve this?
I'll make the motion to approve, Mr. Mayor, but I also,
We'll get a second, then
All
we'll
right.
discuss.
Second it.
It's been second, okay.
I just moved it to the administrative agenda because I would like the town manager just to talk a little bit about what this is and how it relates to item C on the administrative agenda. I think it's a very good step we're taking, but I just think it'd be helpful for the public for him to discuss further what this is, what the purpose of this is for, and how it relates to the next item on the agenda.
Okay, so the reason this item is on the agenda is because of the reallocation of the money. Normally, if we had money already budgeted for this, it wouldn't be on the agenda, and I would just sign and approved it for my administrative authorizations. But since we're here and we're talking about the other item, the reason this item is bifurcated from the following item is that this is an expense that is not reimbursable by the TDC. So this is, I would call it a pre-planning, pre-design phase that we need to do. And then that leads us into item C, which is the full design and permitting, whatever. Mike Pop from the consulting firm is here and can provide you with a lot more particulars about that if you'd like to have them, about the difference between the item B and item C, but that's basically it, Councilor Adall.
Be fine. I'd be interested in hearing just a broad overview of what we're proposing today. It doesn't have to be necessarily the difference, but how they work together and what we're trying to accomplish. I think that'd be good for the public to hear.
Morning. For the record, Michael Poff, Coastal Engineering Consultants. Thank you. The beach monitoring, the timing of it is critical because you want to get it done before hurricane season so that if there is a catastrophic event, there's a declaration of disaster, those data points can be used in support of a claim for post-storm recovery from FEMA for your current existing beach project on the north end of the island. So I think another reason it was separated was to get that going in case that the beach project and the selection would have taken a little bit longer. We want to get those surveys done now in May. The surveys will serve as the preliminary design database for the design of the project. So they will be used by our firm in doing the calculations and also for the permit drawings and things to get the permit application in as timely as possible.
And you want to talk a little bit about item C while you're here?
Sure. So again, Thank you for the opportunity to continue to work with the town. We were selected as the consultant for the next beach project, and through your work and through the ambassadors and stakeholders on the island, let's look at the entire island, not just redoing the north end. We're going to collect some additional data on the parts of the beach that have not had renourishment before. We'll use that in the design process, and we'll go through a full coastal processes analysis, come up with what is the right design template for the rest of the island, and work with your staff and the property owners to look at how do we maximize the potential for state cost sharing in terms of getting funding, which is related to public access, the bus stops are, where the parking spaces are. We can put some bike racks, things that we can do to enhance scoring within the state system in order to hopefully rank as high as we possibly can when we go for funding for construction dollars. And we'll apply for the permits, work with the agencies to process those permits, and coming back to you in October, we'll come back with what will be called Phase 2 services, which will be final design, construction plans and specs, and getting the bid documents ready. So they split it up this way because of the funding mechanism. We'll get as much done as we can in this quote-unquote calendar year, fiscal year, and then we'll come back and do a supplemental STA once we get closer to permitting and the new fiscal year when new dollars are available.
I think that's excellent. Thank you very much. That's a great explanation. And as you do your study, will you be able to demonstrate to the public trends on how the island is accreting or receding and what's causing it? Will you be able to give us a little bit, I know it can't be too specific because it's a little bit difficult to always predict, but will you be able to kind of show us how the island's trending and where things are increasing and decreasing and maybe a little bit why as best you can?
Absolutely. That'll be the very first thing we do after the data is collected is do that coastal processes analysis, look at the trends, look at where we believe the majority of the fill needs to be placed, and then we'll do some presentations come maybe October, November time, and come back to you, come back to stakeholders, have some public meetings to talk about what we have recommended to you in terms of expanding the project. The thing that we'll need is what's called the construction easements. So this is something we'll work with you and with the beachfront property owners. In order to work on private property, you'll need an easement from those property owners for what we call a temporary construction easement to access the property with equipment, to place sand, to do maintenance activities. So there's definitely a huge public interest component that'll be part of our scope.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions.
So I just want to make sure you heard two important things in Mike's comments on item C. One is that this work that we're doing in this current SCA represents roughly half of the work that we'll have to engage with, so there'll be a second half in next fiscal year. The other thing is that if once this project gets to construction, they will literally, like the Estero Road project, go theoretically up and down the beach, and there'll be a construction zone that we'll have to work with the owners to block off. There'll be a pipe on the ground from where the sand will be coming out of. So there will be some areas of the beach that will have to be closed section by section as we go down the beach and do this work, assuming we can get it all permitted and meet all the state criteria.
Very good.
Thanks, Mike.
Welcome. Thank you.
Okay. All the beach realtors will be thrilled that you asked the question, Jim. Okay. Okay, there's a motion, there's a second. This is for item B in the consent agenda. It's been discussed. Any objection? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, we'll go back to B on the administrative agenda. This is RFQ 21-09-EN, Beach Renourishment Professional Services Agreement. This is to authorize the town manager to execute the professional services agreement in response to RFQ-21-09-EN for beach renourishment in the not-to-exceed amount of $170,000 and appropriate and allocate the funds to be reimbursed by the TDC. Is there a motion to authorize the town manager to execute this agreement?
Moved.
Moved. It's been seconded. Discussion? Objection? The motion carries unanimously. Okay. Final public comment. Anyone from the public wish to comment? Sir, Jesse.
I'd like to
comment on your.
Go right up and identify yourself, please, again.
Hi, again. I'd like to comment on
Identify
this.
yourself one more time, Jesse, I'm sorry.
Pardon me?
Give your name.
My name is Jesse Holman, resident 292 Ohio Avenue. I caught it interesting when you're discussing possibilities for your dinghy project for the mooring fields and such forth. Virginia Avenue you had brought up. Obviously, the city owns that property, but if I could put it on record, that property it's in despair. The current homeowner is using that property to store all types of leftover building materials, just an eyesore for me right across the canal. So this discussion you had today might bring some focus into getting the right people out there to at least clean up that property, because it's a valuable piece of property and I hate to see it just littered with these building debris. The second question is, if it's rolled out of your potential candidates, is that property going to go for sale? 'Cause that would be my question.
I brought that up. Yeah, so we'll see, Jesse.
But if you could address the debris on that property and at least get it cleaned up a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Janet Kernan. Mr. Adderholt, thank you for your questions this morning regarding the town manager's contract and his review process. I would hope very much that this council does adhere to that contract and that he does have a public hearing on his status of work. There is some concern that certain items do need to be addressed.
Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment. Town manager's items.
Okay, well, let's start with the last thing first. So on Virginia, there has been encroachment on their property by the adjacent owners, and it was our intent to secure that property so that it's not trespassed upon. We are working with Lee County to establish some dates with regard to hazardous waste collection activities. We have arranged for a quarterly event so people can drop off any hazardous materials rather than put them into the waste stream. Dates we are contemplating with Lee County are November 5th, 21, February 4th of 22, May 6th of 22, and August 5th of 22. All of those would be at Bay Oaks, where they were previously held. Any questions about that?
Thank you for doing that.
Welcome. Okay, the next thing is, as we reopen and lessen our COVID restrictions, we've had a request for a outside summer camp to bring their campers to the pool. This activity could potentially interfere with our local residents using the pool. It's been done in the past, and I don't have any problem with it in the future if the council is comfortable with it, but I just wanted to let you know that, if we go forward and do this as we have in the past, you may, particularly for the new councilors, get a call from somebody. I was trying to use the pool, I couldn't use it because otherwise utilized by these outside camps. So we're fine with it. It's been done in the past, but we just want to make you aware of it and see that this council is comfortable with continuing with our past practice.
Is it like 2 hours at a time?
It's typically 1 day a week. And of course, they pay our fees for the use. It's roughly $180. Not that the money's significant, but the real significant thing is that when they're there, it limits the availability to our residents.
That's why I was asking, is it all day or part of a day?
I do not have the hours, but I would imagine it's for a good portion of the day once they, drive out here. I wouldn't say
I guess I have concerns if there's an entire day that the residents could not access the pool.
be a day a week, basically during the, we would lose a good portion of it, if not the entire day.
What ages are the kids?
I don't have that information. It's another summer camp, so I assume it's,
Young kids.
elementary school and possibly some younger junior high school kids.
Problem is, they're not vaccinated yet, and well, they may be at some point over the summer. But, funny, I don't want a decision now.
No, I just, we'll wait till you decide, but they're inquiring because they're trying to plan their activities, so they would appreciate an answer sooner than.
What's the entity? Is there an entity?
I don't have that information from Allison, but I can tell you they have done it in the past.
Right?
Yes. With Mr. Holman's matter that he mentioned, it's a true statement that he got caught up in the code change. And it's a true statement that under our current rules, there is a variance process for him to be allowed to proceed. Of course, council controls the rules, so that if you wish to modify those rules for him because he got caught up in that, do that, or you can have him follow our prescribed regulations, which would be the variance process.
This be a candidate for an administrative change, or would it be?
Well, it's, when you have these text amendments, as much as we're trying to be careful to make sure people don't get caught up in them, inevitably someone does. So, our concern from the staff perspective is that we don't take decision-making out of the hands of the council. So, it's up to you how much discretion you want to give us with respect to these types of issues. Prior councils wanted to give us very little. Council may want to give us more. So, right now, if you read the letter of the law is that he would be required to get a variance because he got caught up in this window. You want to recognize the fact that he was caught up with it and hold him to his word that basically he's building exactly where it is. He's just raising it 3 feet. And you have no other concerns with his projects about not seeing all the details of his project? You can tell us that today. If you want to wait and see details, and he'll have to make an application for a variance and all that would have to come in, and you have to see all the other related details.
I guess I'm confused as to how he was caught up in the new stuff, because the new stuff, my understanding, is setbacks for new builds. My house encroaches upon the setback, and I was told years ago that I had to get a variance if I wanted to raise it up. So I don't understand, if he's just wanting to raise up something and he's already encroached upon the setback, how he got caught up in the new regulations is confusing to me.
Jason Green Community Development, there's two parts to his request originally when we reviewed it. There's an addition for, I think it was a kitchen or expansion of that meets the previous setbacks, and he got caught up in that. So the new setback of 10 feet instead of 7.5 feet would apply to that. So
He would have always had to have come in for a variance to raise up his house if he was encroaching. So he's got to come in for a variance anyway.
For that portion, correct. So the addition he could do within the old setbacks, but not the current setbacks. It would shrink that addition. And then to his point, yes, the rest of it, raising the house, does require a variance.
So even if we gave him leeway, he still has to come in for a variance for the other part.
If he chose to raise it to 3 feet, he could choose to just do the addition and ask for that relief. The older setbacks apply since he was already in the process. I don't know if that's his option, but that's something that we talked about. It's really two different parts to it. With you on that raising.
You wouldn't very well do the kitchen if you're going to raise the house, right?
And frankly, staff tries to work with property owners if it's flood related. It's clear in the code to differentiate between that, but we do look at that different a little. already above base flood, so it's not like it's a life safety thing. Choice to raise. Again, I think his main focus was about the setback, 2.5 to the 10.
Doesn't seem like an easy one just to say, okay. I think we'd have to have some sort of preliminary information to look at, my opinion, before we granted that. You know, I know he doesn't want to go through with the cost of all of it and so forth, and same time, we're trying to be equitable, but we have to see something. Just going on conversation right now. I mean, we'd have to see something.
And we get this question a lot about that setback change. We are in May now and you for you, and suggested that others come before you to ask for maybe an extension or to setting some parameters of when, hey, I was already in design and here's some, can we utilize at the date of that? And I don't, several months past this taking. That's an option too. We could bring before you some of the criteria such as DEP setback letter. We write those ahead of time. It takes several months to get back from there. Those are things that we're implementing. They're not applying the new code. We are applying old code. He didn't have to get one of those, so there's not a proof of a date. We're in May. And
How many people would you think are in the same situation that could potentially come back, whatever the council decided to do?
well, I mean, I guess to my point of the being in May is we're several months past. My guess is most of or project wasn't covered, so what's a moot point of this? Planning in February and March.
How do you all feel about this?
I agree with you, Mayor. I don't know if I'd be comfortable with making any decisions without seeing a little bit more information.
I agree.
The way it is. I mean, it doesn't have to be super extensive, but just something that we can look at and maybe even at the next meeting, Jesse.
What we can do is, I'm sorry,
I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Oh, I was just going to say that the normal process would be that he filed an application for a variance, and that would go to the LPA and eventually would come to you all. I think I'm hearing that's what you want, sort of the normal process, to help understand everything, so you can ultimately make a decision.
Is there any way to, by doing that, that we can help alleviate some of the cost issue? Or is it,
Waive
it
the
is
fee
what
if
it
you want
is?
to.
Right. Well, there's your direction. All right.
Okay, with regard to Mr. Cola's request, he and I had a conversation prior to today.
Right.
And he and I thought had an agreement in principle with regard to how he could possibly address his concerns and address the town's safety concerns. In his phone call, he indicated that that would be acceptable. So it's my belief that we could do something similar like was done in front of the stores alongside Red Coconut, where the sloping sidewalk coming down to the edge of the road. He agreed to help address our safety concerns by putting since the vehicles won't be going in and out of there a lot because they're going to be guests of his hotel, basically they're going to park and pay for the length of their stay and then leave. Won't be a lot of traffic, so that's the reason why we agreed with that. But still, there's a person walking down the street with their face in their phone and not necessarily pay attention. He said that he would educate his customers to be aware of that situation, be careful when backing up through a variety of techniques. And with that understanding on his part, I'm willing to go against sort of the best practices of the engineers, which is to not allow cars to back up over a sidewalk.
I'm in favor of the compromise. I think that we get a sidewalk, he gets to preserve his parking.
I agree too.
That's the way to
it's
go.
a very good compromise.
Okay, Then,
Well, since we're on that, and we're talking about, the other side of the street, I would assume would be the same setup as far as same design then, or would that be the conventional design with the curb?
I haven't looked at the other side to know if there's an issue there that has a problem that needs to be addressed or not, so,
I've also been contacted by the owner of SOBs who's going to be affected by the sidewalk as well. Don't know if they have the same flexibility that Tommy and his group have as far as being able to keep their spot and have sidewalk. So there's a potential, I don't know the amount of spaces, I think it was 4 or 5 spaces that they could potentially lose of their parking. I don't know if it would be the will of council to look into that or have the staff look into something that we could potentially do if he was going to lose those 5 parking spots. To,
excuse me. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I received a similar call, and I think if compromise like the one we just approved would be available to SOBs, I think it could be extended to
I
them
don't believe
as
it's the same circumstances. I think there, the parking spots use the sidewalk area parking. So it would be a no sidewalk situation there, I believe. I haven't fully looked at it, but it's my preliminary recollection. The circumstances. In this case, the sidewalk is out of the parking zone. In this case, the parking zone and the sidewalk overlap.
So they're essentially now using the right-of-way for parking,
Yes.
Partially.
partially.
Yeah. Well, it's worth looking into a bit more to see if some sort of accommodation can be made for that area as well. I'm not averse to trying to help everybody out, but if it can be. But, ready?
Okay, which takes me to the last item. This council and previous council sets up the rules as to who can use the public spaces in Times Square and other public spaces that the town owns. And anytime you wish to review that ordinance and modify it to allow additional uses, it's fine by the staff. So I know that's been addressed to you all individually, so let's get it on the public record. And you wish to expand the uses in Times Square or any other public space, it's fine by us.
So what is the reason why Mr. Ryan's application for broadcasting from the right-of-way in Times Square was rejected?
Well, based on my contacting the town attorney and his review of the ordinance, he doesn't qualify at this point. He's not a street performer. And we have other items in our code that limit cable chairs, wiring, and other things. So
His request was to go back into the dining area of Pete's Timeout, or was it to be a public performer out in the square itself?
he submitted an application to be a street performer, and was so far afield, we didn't even cash his check or whatever, we just sent it back to him. So it was so far afield. But that doesn't mean that you all can't change the code to allow that.
I think one thing that nobody's saying out loud here is that Beach Talk Radio is a business. And we do not allow street performers to be businesses. In fact, we pulled back on that statute saying that they weren't allowed to sell things that they were making there. The other people in that plaza pay huge rents in order to conduct business in Times Square. So to allow a business to be a street performer is really a slap in the face of the other businesses due to the fact that they pay rent.
And the street performers.
And the only thing I'd clarify in that is they've agreed not to sell cups and T-shirts if they were granted the ability to do their show
They sell
outside.
advertising. It's not just cups and hats.
Obviously, they've made a decision not to appeal the ruling of the town, so I don't want to belabor it, but I do think the town based its decisions on, particularly the fact that they would need wires to be plugged in and so forth. The show has its own battery packs. They don't need to plug into anything. They're totally autonomous. I just worry at times, talked about the newspaper rack ordinance in the past. some of the not by anyone on this council, but some of the motivations for those rack requirements had to do with people upset with the content of the sandpaper. And there's a First Amendment issue here that we tread on occasionally, at least get up to the edge, where it appears as if there's repercussions for those folks who are utilizing their First Amendment rights, and that gives me pause. And I, because it's not being formally appealed today, I'm not going to belabor it, but I think we need to be really careful in terms of the message we send, in terms of how we enforce it. Now, we've asked Beach Talk Radio to not broadcast outside on the property that's leased from the town, and for a couple of years, everyone had been broadcasting from that location. So we're all complicit in this quote-unquote heinous crime that's since been reversed. I think it creates an awkward situation for the town. It's potentially divisive for the town. I wish we could figure out some kind of an accommodation where it would just bring people together. We could not have this two-track town where we pit one another against each other, and it troubles me. And I know yeah, I know Beach Talk Radio can be divisive, and I don't always agree with that approach. But at the same time, they do have First Amendment rights, and it's I think it's in the interest of the town to try to resolve this, to bring the town together as best we can. I know that small towns, there's always divisions, but it seems like we ought to be bending over backwards to make every effort to bring everybody together as best we can, even with the disagreements that we have. I wish we could disagree more agreeably.
Town manager, was that it for you?
Well, I just have to say this, Counselor. If you and two other colleagues feel that we change the code to allow it to be out there, then he's allowed to be out there.
I don't even know that we need to change the code. I think the code was poorly interpreted by denying their.
I'm pretty sure the town attorney will tell you otherwise, but that's okay.
We've talked.
And again, I think we already get to, I've spoken with John about this as well, and I respect what your point was, Madam Mayor, but where, again, do we draw the line as far as what's allowable and what's not allowable? If there's a 18-year-old gentleman sitting at a different restaurant doing a podcast that he sells advertising for, are we going to go remove him from the premises? Are we going to tell Wink or NBC News that are out there during a hurricane for hours that they can't be there because they're running a business? I guess, where do you draw the line between what's allowable and what's not allowable? I agree with you if they were running constantly, every day, 8 hours a day, running a business. I agree with the sentiments of Councilor Adeholt. Don't always agree with what comes on the program. Definitely takes a hard line on some things that I don't agree with. But I'm worried as well that where do we draw the line between who's allowed to do it, who's allowed not to do it, where are we going to turn and look away, or are we not going to look away? And I know I'm going to get it's based on formal complaints. It only goes so far. As Jim had mentioned, they didn't come in and formally appeal it, so I don't want to beat on it, but I'm glad it was brought up and discussed at least.
Well, let me just say this for the record. The content of the show has nothing to do with this. It may have something to do with it in some people's mind. It has zero to do with it in my mind. Either it complies with the code or doesn't comply with the code, and I believe at this point it doesn't, but that doesn't mean that you all can't change that. And if you do, we will welcome him with open arms.
I think, the commercial activity thing is an important part of this, because if someone wants to sell hot dogs in the middle of the square, they put a sign up, some message, Jesus saves, does that mean they're allowed to sell hot dogs? It's really the commercial aspect that makes this problematical.
Town attorney.
I've already I assume we'll talk about town attorney reports. I've already forwarded to you all the email that I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the meeting regarding the manager's contract. Certainly available to answer any questions or follow up with each of you individually if you desire. As I said before, it's within your discretion. There is some, attached to the policies and procedure, there's a specific evaluation form to help guide you in that regard if you so elect to use it. Otherwise available to answer any questions. With regard to the last matter, I've spoken to most, if not all of you, regarding the code and how it was interpreted. Just change the code, let us know, and we'll do so. Nothing further.
Could you just help us understand? It's contract language of section 5. It says the town council, it's not a may provision, it's a shall provision. That doesn't give you any pause? What you said it?
As far as the timing,
Yeah.
that's within your discretion, and if you're asking me, does the failure to conduct the manager's evaluation prior to the end of this month void the contract? No, sir. Best practices? Yes. I can't tell you why it wasn't placed on before. I can tell you from my personal experiences, I had that issue with regard to my contract several years ago before this council, and I make it a point to get with the clerk to make sure that prior to the end of the fiscal year, my contract is placed on an agenda for renewal, because mine is year to year. With respect to the manager's early an evaluation process. The charter gives you wide discretion. Is there language in the contract that says the evaluations take between, I think it's February and before the end of this month? Yes, it does. Again, does that mean that there's a breach of the contract if you fail to do so? I would say no, because in the charter you all have exclusive and unfettered discretion on how you interact with the manager.
Anything else, sir?
Nothing.
Council members' items. Councilman Allers, we'll start with you.
I had two. Counselor Idle already took care of the first one at the beginning, so I won't go over that. I just wanted to give an update on what we talked about with the Lee County Sheriff's Office and the Outreach Center. We do have an appointment with Beach Baptist tomorrow to discuss potentially using that site. We've also had discussions about potentially using other sites that I had brought up before. Another one that was brought to my attention by one of our former esteemed colleagues that I was unaware of is the parking lot between Winds and White House Tiki. Didn't realize that was town-owned, where Center Street goes through. There's some parking there that could potentially leave a little bit of room for an outreach center that would be under our control. We wouldn't have to require FDOT to come in and tell us it's okay or have them to move. Once it's there, so to speak. But I wanted to just let you know that's also another consideration. I know that Madam Vice Mayor wanted them to speak with the church. They're speaking with the church tomorrow. It does sound promising, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work out fully, or we couldn't potentially make something else along down the line.
It used to be in the county park rather than using.
They did.
Have they checked into?
It's my understanding that they have talked to the county about certain locations, and the county hasn't been willing. They've offered them a spot up at Bowditch, which doesn't make a lot of sense. Logistically doesn't make sense, but I can reach out to them again if you'd like to find out specific reasons as to why Crescent Beach or Town Hall Park wouldn't work. I just thought that the idea of that parking lot made a lot of sense to me as a potential small. They're not looking for a large footprint, just a small area where you come over the bridge. People can turn in wallets, people can report a lost dog, people can report crimes, a place that's easily accessible for the majority of people that come to visit the island, but there's still a place that they can go. Great Beach Baptist Church area would work great for their outreach stuff, having the dog issues, having, community policing type events. There's parking there. They seem very willing to work with them. I just think it might be a nice added bonus, if it's available, to use a space still up in Times Square to have just a small footprint of the Lee County Sheriff's Office presence. For anyone that needs assistance, I think we've seen over the last couple of months that it has been very useful. Crimes have been reported, crimes have been solved, but have been reported and have been addressed quickly by having someone in that location. So just something to keep in the back of your minds as we move forward with the discussions. That's all I have.
Vice Mayor.
I guess I'd like to report that the TDC did, and this is related to our beach renourishment approvals today. The TDC did go to the second level of approval for all of our projects, second time. Those now grants all go to the county commissioners for approval. I think it would be highly unusual that they wouldn't pass at this point, having gone through the TDC process. Just a light matter to bring up. I had brought up the issue of rodents in our community and laughingly asking about snakes and feral cats. It turns out I have found that the city of Chicago has been using feral cats for rat issues, rodents in their community. So I guess I wasn't as crazy as I thought I was. And if this turns into an issue where we do get more people indicating concern, that's something we can consider is our feral cat community. And they do have homeowners support the feral cats in the community. It's not island, it wouldn't have to be island-wide. A particular street could come to us and say, hey, we're interested in having some feral cats. There is a group that does it. They are searching for the initials now. Ones that have been caught and neutered and released. So it's interesting that there's a group out there providing that service.
Dare you compare us to Chicago? Anyhow, thank you very much for that. I don't have too much. I just I'd like to reiterate, we're all watching very carefully the goings-on up at Lake Okeechobee at the moment. The blue-green algae that's cooking up there and our red tide off of the shores down here at the moment. So we're all holding our collective breath, hoping that we don't have any adverse impacts from that. The point is that it's not time to let down our guard, nor to remain silent about this. To keep up the communications, the pressures to our higher elected officials and the powers to be. But, we are watching, and we don't want a repeat. We don't want a repeat of 2018. So we'll keep looking at that, and I'll just remind everyone and the staff that again, tomorrow is Casey Bishop Day in the town of Fort Myers Beach. We'll have this proclamation redone, put it in a nice frame, and at some point along the way, we'll get it to Casey and wish her well with her future endeavors. That's all for me. Jim.
Say amen to your water comments, Mr. Mayor, and I have nothing additional. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, ditto, I was out on a boat last week and we went into San Carlos Pass and just started coughing. Now I think there's high readings in the Lover's Key area. And I think historically, the last 2 years, this time of year, we haven't really had any red tide readings. The last time we had red tide readings this time of year was 2018. And it gets worse as there's more water flowing and the water temperatures go up. So it's, I hope that those indicators prove false. We don't have another bad summer. One point, the land in Virginia, is it worth putting a fence on either side of that so that this is delimited, or is the town now maintaining, mowing, that kind of stuff, that land?
So the short answer is that we're contemplating putting up access control to stop people storing materials on there. We would control the access to the property.
And does the town send somebody like to mow the grass and trim?
We take care of the property, but we also have many conversations with the adjacent owners about not putting stuff on it.
Okay. And is there also maybe an option to see if the neighborhood wants to kind of adopt that lot as like a neighborhood park? That we would put the responsibility of maintaining it on the neighbors and let them.
Well, we have a process for that. They haven't reached out to us to suggest that, but, you know, we're open-minded towards that.
Okay, well, if anybody's on Virginia and would like to pursue that, contact the town manager. All I have.
Come on, Val, Virginia, don't be late. Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? Not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Move second, discussion, objection. We're adjourned at 11:01. Thank you.
Nice audition there, Mayor, but I think the competition is pretty much